Right now, President Obama laid out his plans for America's new gun laws. The question is, will they pass and will they make America safer? And next, the NRA's new ad campaign gets personal, calling Obama a hypocritical elitist who's more concerned about his kids' safety than anyone else's. Does it go too far? And later, Booker and Lautenberg locking horns. Booker wants Lautenberg's gig, but the 88-year-old senator says not so fast. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French, and thanks so much for joining us this Wednesday evening, January 16th. The President, he made his case today for stronger gun violence prevention measures, and he signed 23 executive orders, all dealing with the subject. But those executive orders, they were not where the meat of this argument lies. Now, the President, he went directly to Congress to pass laws on assault weapons, ammo clips, background checks, and more. And he made his case saying that our right to bear arms does not cancel out all other rights we as American citizens have. Rights like life, liberty, and safety.
This is the land of the free, and it always will be. As Americans, we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights that no man or government can take away from us. But we've also long recognized, as our founders recognized, that with rights come responsibilities. We are responsible for each other. You know, the right to worship freely and safely, that right was denied to Sikhs in Oak Creek, Wisconsin. The right to assemble peacefully, that right was denied shoppers in Clackamas, Oregon, and moviegoers in Aurora, Colorado. That most fundamental set of rights to life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness, fundamental rights that were denied to college students at Virginia Tech and high school students at Columbine and elementary school students in Newtown and kids on street corners in Chicago on too frequent a basis to tolerate it. And all the families who've never imagined that they'd lose a loved one to a bullet. Those rights are at stake. We're responsible.
All right, we're going to have much more of what the President had to say later in the program, but I want to bring in now our senior political correspondent for a look at what exactly the White House is pushing. And Andrew, for anybody who earlier thought that the White House was going to go small, that they weren't going to have an ambitious plan here, they were disappointed because the President, he's really aiming for the fences here. Yeah, he's really going big, and a lot of the big ticket items are in this proposal, Rich. Let's start with those proposals that will require the consent of Congress. Among them, background checks for all gun sales, an assault weapons ban, a 10-round limit on ammo magazines, a ban on armor-piercing bullets, providing law enforcement with additional tools to prevent and prosecute gun crimes, and ensuring that health insurance plans cover mental health benefits. Now, as Rich mentioned, Obama also signed 23 executive orders today that were relatively non-controversial. Most are administrative and do not need congressional consent, such as publishing research, writing memos, etc. Here are the highlights: requiring federal agencies to make relevant data available to the federal background check system, improving incentives for states to share information with the background check system, directing the Attorney General to review categories of individuals prohibited from having a gun to make sure dangerous people aren't slipping through the cracks, launching a national safe and responsible gun ownership campaign, issuing a presidential memorandum requiring federal law enforcement to trace guns that are recovered in criminal investigations, releasing a letter to state health officials clarifying the mental health services that Medicaid plans must cover, committing to finalizing mental health parity regulations. Now, in response to today's press conference and submissions by the president, the NRA issued a statement, quote, attacking firearms and ignoring children is not a solution to the crisis we face as a nation. Only honest, law-abiding gun owners will be affected, and our children will remain vulnerable to the inevitability of more tragedy. The response from House Speaker John Boehner was tepid at best, his spokesman releasing this, quote, House committees of jurisdiction will review these recommendations, and if the Senate passes a bill, we will also take a look at that. And then the governor of Connecticut, Daniel Malloy, offered his support for the president's plan, saying, quote, the common sense measures he proposed today are something that we should all be able to agree on. Rich? All right, Andrew. So the question is, will the president's proposal get through, and will will they make America safer? And joining us now to sound off, Vince Casale. He's the founder of the Casale Group, or a Republican consulting and communications firm. We got Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, of course. Ryan Davis, veteran of the Howard Dean campaign, the executive director of social innovation at Blue State Digital, media strategy firm, and Andrew Whitman, who you have already met. All right. First of all, whether you agree or not, the president today, he was flanked by a bunch of kids who wrote letters to the president. He invoked the memories of shootings that we've seen here, and he had a personal connection, which we'll bring on a little bit later, to one particular child, a young girl who died in Newtown and whose parents were in the audience. I think he laid it out really clear what the fight was. As Joe Biden said before him, this is not going to be an easy fight. But I thought he did a really good job articulating at least what he wanted to do. You agree, Dom?
Definitely. The president put on the table some common sense measures. I understand that they may be extreme to some folks, but to a majority of the American people, they're common sense and long overdue, Richard. And he admitted it's going to be a battle. The president admitted that. But I hope that people of goodwill heard the president say, if you don't keep the heat up, it's not going to happen.
You know what? I'd love to play, Vince, one of the other things the president said, which is it's not extreme what he's proposing. And he invoked the memory of Republicans, patron saint here. Let's play the clip here of President Obama talking about another former president who called for assault weapon bans.
This is our first task as a society, keeping our children safe. This is how we will be judged. Weapons designed for the theater of war have no place in a movie theater. A majority of Americans agree with us on this. And by the way, so did Ronald Reagan, one of the staunchest defenders of the Second Amendment, who wrote to Congress in 1994 urging them, this is Ronald Reagan speaking, urging them to listen to the American public and to the law enforcement community and support a ban on the further manufacture of military-style assault weapons.
Vince, if Reagan could shepherd it through, why after a Newtown school massacre do you think this president couldn't get any Republican support for it?
Well, right now, I think you're going to see that the president's going to have more than just a problem with Republican support. He has some Democratic support. As of right now, today, his proposals don't pass the Senate. He doesn't have Senate Leader Harry Reid's support on this yet, so he has a long way to go.
You might be right, but I'll tell you what Harry Reid did say. He said, I don't know if it'll get through the House. I think we'll get into the political capital. I'll ask Ryan about this, how much the president's going to be willing to spend on this. But let's say the Democrats line up in line. Will they have any Republicans who'll stand with them?
I think it depends on the end result of what we see. And as the Republican in the room, I will throw a bone to the president. His pieces where he outlined increased enforcement and more emphasis on mental health are a must. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. When you get into some of the other,
well, let me do the high points or the bold ones that is going to divide this or be at least debatable. Background checks on all gun sales, not just some of them. Reinstating the assault weapons ban that we already spoke about. The size of these ammo clips, to limit it to, I believe 7 was the number that he's talking about now instead of 10. And prohibiting possession, transfer of basically armor-piercing bullets. I can't believe we're debating about we should have armor-piercing bullets. But anyway, having an ATF director, who cares? And then a few other things. But let's get to the crux of it. If you buy a gun, you got to go through a background check. Certain guns you can't own in this country anymore, and that there's certain, and that we should actually be able to have a database so we know who owns what. Sure. Why is that? If it's limited to that, why is that such an anathema for Republicans? And don't you get a sense, Vince, that in certain parts of this country, a year from now, if they vote against this, there'll be more money that'll be spent going against them than money they'll even raise with the NRA. Is there a political danger here for people just to say, I'm with the NRA as always?
Well, and also I think you're bringing up there's a number of issues that the president's brought up that you just mentioned that are already on the books, things that aren't being enforced as well as they can be enforced. And that's where we have to make sure the argument gets back to what can we do to make our society safer.
Okay, one more thing,
Now-
and I want to bring in everybody else.
Yep.
You work with New York electeds, and you know very well New York Republicans. The governor was able to get something through with Republican support in the legislature that was every bit as tough as this, if not arguably even tougher. Republicans in New York who would have opposed this years ago voted for this now. I'm sure a lot of it has good conscience, but they also do the political math. Why is it in Republican safe districts in this state they would vote for this, but they couldn't do it other places?
I think in New York, totally different situation. I think you have some Republican legislators who made some calculated mistakes the other night the way they voted, and it's going to. We'll see. We'll see long term. I think you're going to see primaries.
Okay.
I think you're going to see. The Second Amendment is I think a more galvanizing issue than as we saw in the last cycle with same-sex marriage.
My gut,
and I think
Ryan,
you're going to
is
see those. You're going to see
my
those
gut
primaries.
is, and Vince probably is more right than I am on these things, but I think he's wrong. I think in this particular case, there will be bucket loads of money from all different stakeholders that will run against people who voted against this. And I saw Chuck Scarborough, who is Chuck Scarborough. I saw Joe Scarborough from Northern Florida, who says, "I'm in the redneck Riviera, and trust me. If I was running now, I would go against this because this is just going to be like gay marriage. It's just going to be like this is not going to go over well because there will be another tragedy."
Right.
So, was it enough the president said what he did today, or do progressive groups will they demand that he go after even Harry Reid if Harry Reid and other Democrats don't get in line?
Look, I wrote yesterday that I think that for this to pass, the internet is going to have to get behind it, that we're going to have to be making phone calls, knocking on doors, getting people motivated.
MoveOn's already pledged with a couple 100,000 signatures and stuff, right?
Bloomberg's got some extraordinary stuff going on as well. No, I think that this is going to be a real fight, and it's a fight that the president is willing to spend political capital on, but it's got to be a fight that we all get involved in.
And Andrew, would you agree here that if you went to Vegas, the betting line tonight is the president loses if there were a vote today, but his odds go up a week from now, or no? Or is it the other way around?
I think his odds probably go down the further away from the last tragedy that we get to. Keep in mind, it's not just fighting money from the NRA or having money available that will help, gun supporters fight back on this. You're fighting against public opinion.
But if you hear from moms,
districts,
if you hear from cops, if you hear from other people who say enough.
That public opinion has had decades where it's been reinforced, and the message has been reinforced again and again and again and again.
Well,
you got to change hearts and minds, not just the politics.
You get then to both the message and the messenger. And when we come back from break here, we're going to be talking about the messengers, and there's two clear ones. There's the president's camp, and now the stakeholders will line up behind him. And then there's the NRA. If you didn't see the ad that came out, a lot of people that are talking about it will show it to you, and it calls the president, among other things, a hypocritical elitist who's more concerned about his two daughters than anybody else's. Have they gone too far? We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the app. We'll talk about more of what people had to say today. Stay with us.